within the system of Reiki, we do practices that work with developing that part of the body, so the lower abdomen, so strengthening it. And it's like the core. And the more practices that we do with it, so our major meditation practices work with that part of the body, then the more that we work with it, it's almost like, I'm going to use the word clearing, but, sort of like clearing that aspect of ourselves. And we can think of it like a bit of a bonfire. When you're breathing down into the lower abdomen, you're firing that up, and you're burning away the stuff that you don't need. So we're actually shifting ourselves from that core that we received from our families, and we can, we can actually change. I think this is the thing. We're not necessarily, yes, there are certain aspects of us that can't change, as you said, but there are things about us that we can change, and that's sort of what we work with that. And then the beautiful thing is, if you have children, you can pass that on to your children. But even just being together, like us being together, being in a room with people, you're always affecting everyone around you with how you are and how you say things and how you do things. So shifting yourself to be a better person, I guess, is ultimately what we are working at.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Bronwen Logan, and we're going to be talking about the Japanese Art of Reiki. We're going to find out what it is and a lot of history. She is the co-author of the Reiki Sourcebook, which is coming out with its 20th anniversary edition. It is the definitive source book for all those who want to find out more about Reiki, the history of Reiki, as well as the different schools of Reiki that are all around the world. Bronwen has 25 years of teaching experience, which extends beyond the conversational, exploring the deep transformative elements of the system of Reiki. It's a fascinating talk. We get into a few other tangents that you might be interested in. Here she is. This is Bronwen Logan. Bronwen, it's so great to meet you. I know you're in Australia, so that's fantastic. I love this internet thing. I'm in Los Angeles, you're in Australia, and we're talking. Fantastic. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about something that I don't know that much about, which is why I love to do this show, because I can always try to learn something along with the audience, and it's Reiki. I thought it was a type of massage, but it's not. That was my first mistake or lack of understanding. So let's tell people what Reiki is and then what you're doing about this 20th anniversary of this book that we're going to be talking about. So start with what Reiki is.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, Bob. Reiki is a Japanese practice. So it comes from Japan. There was a guy who started it in the early 1900s in Japan, so just over 100 years ago. And he put together a practice of things that related to what he was doing for himself. So he was someone who'd been born into a samurai family. And, the samurai had a lot of practices within each of their clans that they would pass on. And the emperor at the time actually banned the samurai. So he changed a lot of things. He opened up the country, which had been closed to the rest of the world. And the founder of the system, Reiki, Mikao Usui, he found himself without being a samurai, so without sort of this elite status, without his clan, and like a lot of martial arts at that time, opened it up to the rest of the world. So if you think about a lot of things like judo, kendo, or aikido, they all came from these original samurai families that, because the samurai families were closed down, they opened it up to the world and they started teaching anyone who was interested. Now, we don't know if Reiki was a specific practice within his family, but I would say part of it would come from his family clan. And then it just came from his wealth of knowledge through his life. So, you know, as we all do, we do things. He was interested in spiritual practices. So he developed his own spiritual practice for himself, and other people started asking about that, how to learn that, and he started teaching them. It looks like it went through a number of different phases, but what we do know is that at the beginning of the 1900s in Japan, there were a lot of similar practices happening. So there were people doing hands-on healing, for example. There were some very big teachers in Japan who were teaching that in the early 1900s. You know, I've seen photos of halls full of people doing meditation practice and then placing hands on each other. So it's an energetic practice. And the system of Reiki evolved into that. So we might say in the beginning, it was more of something that you just did for yourself, a meditation practice to strengthen your own energy. And then it evolved into something which you could do with other people. So something which you could help other people with their healing. And when we talk about healing, we're talking about that in a number of different ways. So it's not just a physical thing, but in the Japanese idea of what healing is, we can see that it could be the body, so the physical self, it could be the mind, so our emotions, and it can be the heart. So they work with these three parts of the body, and the heart is, you know, our feelings. So we're working with these different aspects of ourselves, all in combination with one another when we do the meditation practices. We also have chanting, there's Japanese chanting, there's symbols, there's all sorts of stuff, and it all comes together, and it depends what works for you as to sort of what realm you move into. And it's a practice that you can work on yourself with and also on other people if you want, but you don't have to.
I always thought it was like there's a practitioner and that you and the person does
You can,
certain things, moves energy around basically, or releases energy that's stuck. That's kind of how I always saw these types of things.
Well, I would say that if I were a practitioner, then I would sort of open myself up. I'd sit in that meditative space, and I would bring the client into the same space with me. And their intention and my intention is to be open for healing. And like I said, body, mind, the heart, or breath, we sometimes call it, and bring them into that healing space with me. And allow their body to actually do the healing. So instead of me controlling the situation, there are energy practices obviously that exist where there's a lot of that sort of thing. With traditional Japanese Reiki, that's not the case, and it's very much about allowing the body to take what it needs and to do with it what it wants. So I'm not sort of like manipulating anything. All I'm doing is just being open in this meditative space, allowing my energy to flow and asking them to allow that to happen for them as well. Because I think that if we look at our bodies, they can all, each moment of our lives, we're trying to get back into balance. So we're always shifting, changing, and every moment of life is different. So we're always trying to get back into this state of balance. And something like this practice, because it's not manipulative, there's no diagnosis. It's really just allowing the body to let go and try to find that balance for themselves.
But, I've experimented with a lot of different modalities. So I'm open to pretty much anything that works, and not everything works for everybody. Not everything works all the time, which is an interesting thing I've noticed. When I think about like
Very true.
Acupuncture's been, that's a very concrete thing. Needles are going into your, and I've had it work for me and I've had it not work at all. And who knows why, but one day it does, one day it doesn't. But it's, it's the human body's pretty complex in some ways that are, you can't, it's not a very exacting thing. It's based on a lot of different factors. So this sounds really interesting that you, so now there's a book that there's some, okay, tell us about this book that that's coming out. I think you did it with a partner. I can't remember. In the reading, there's a book that's coming out. It's a 20th anniversary of something. I don't remember. This is how thoroughly I do my research. I read it once and then
You're
I forget.
a great researcher.
Well, I read the material and I said, well, I like to read the material and then I like to forget what I read. So I like these interviews to be fresh to me. Like, so the information is as new to me as it is the audience, which is my excuse for being a little lazy. I think that's part of it too. But I really, I like to find out again. Let's put it that way.
Before we do, just about acupuncture,
Oh, great. Mm-hmm.
Like if we looked at traditional Japanese acupuncture, I was just thinking about it when you were talking, that also works with energy, interestingly enough. And so the idea being that you would hold the needle, but that it is, if you think about it, the needle is just the tool. And so you're allowing that energy to flow. And then, the needle is, it's like it's within the system of Reiki, it's the same. We have different tools, not physical tools, but, like I said, we might chant or, use a symbol or something like that. But they're simply tools to bring us into this sort of, space, so allowing us to connect with a certain intention, which in other ways would be quite difficult to actually find that in that, to go into that intention quickly. So I do wonder, well, I know that initially when they first did acupuncture, that it was a very energetic practice. Today, I don't know if they think of it in those terms as much, but traditionally in Japan, I know that was the case. But back to the book. So the book is the Reiki Sourcebook, and it came out 20 years ago. And I wrote it with my ex-husband, and it was a research book, and it still is a research book. And it was this sort of, for the time, especially within the system of Reiki, a massive book, because most books were simply just Reiki manuals. And I've got a copy of it here with me now, but I haven't got the new revised edition yet, which is coming out very, very soon. So, in fact, I got a message that it was in the warehouse today. So that was sort of exciting. But it's a book that's quite thick. It's got lots and lots of research into it about the system of Reiki from a Japanese perspective, and then every direction that it sort of took from when it began until today. So it takes you through all the different directions, all the different ideas that people have had. It's not about one sort of specific style or way. And the idea of it is that it's there for people who are interested in the practice or teach the practice and want to find out more about what they know and where that might come from, about, the practices that they practice, like where did that come from? Who started that? Because it did split a lot when it came to the West. And when the woman who brought it to the West, when she died in 1980, it really it split in a lot of different directions in America and then went through the rest of the world. So there's lots of different ideas actually about what Reiki is because of that. And it became involved in a lot of New Age things. It sort of took on many different lives. And this book traces those lives.
Okay. So it's a pretty thorough research and all the different ways that this thing sort of, let's say, blossomed in different directions.
Yeah. So it's sort of interesting. It's interesting for anyone who does Reiki. It tracks those things, but, it's got an enormous glossary in it full of any word. Because it's a Japanese practice, it's quite foreign to those of us in the West and Japanese culture is famously quite, how do you say that, in itself. And it's quite difficult to work out where, to find out information. It's quite difficult actually to research because it's a different way of talking about something and being with something than we might do in the West. So if I were to ask someone in Japan a question, they might say yes to answer me, but maybe yes is not quite the right answer, but it's what they think is what I want to hear or appropriate in that moment. So, it's having to navigate different cultures as well and understand, trying to find out what's the real sort of truths behind things. It could be quite difficult.
I could see that when you examine another culture and interact with them, there is, I don't even know how to put it, a way of being that is different than another culture's way of being, and you can't even really put words to it. It's sort of the way people move through the world, an understanding and a perception that may be very different than your own. So that sort of it's almost like you have to translate that. It's not like you're translating an actual language of words. You're translating a thing that you may not even fully understand because you haven't lived it. So that is a challenge. So I can see why that would take a minute to figure out what's the best way to do that.
And people are very polite in Japan,
Yes, that's what I've heard.
Unlike our cultures.
Yeah, we're pretty crude.
Well, we try to be polite, but I mean, it is different. It is, yeah.
I think we're a little bit louder for sure, and less reserved for what I've noticed. But
yeah, for sure.
It's so. How did you get interested in this? Because it doesn't seem like something you probably grew up with.
No, I didn't have like a samurai clan or anything like that
Right.
to come out of, for sure. I think I was always interested in spiritual practices, being more aware of myself, more conscious. And I think I was always looking for something that was quite grounded. I enjoyed meditation practice. I've been interested. I lived in India for 2 years. I've been very interested in other cultures as well, but also interested in, spiritual practice. So just sort of finding my way through that and finding something that I felt was quite grounded, not too airy-fairy, that it was something that made sense to me. And I think it made sense to me only after I learned it. When I first studied it, I actually studied it first in Nepal, in India, with an Englishman. And the course that I did was, all over the place. In those days, there wasn't a lot of research into the practice. So, it was very, it was a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this. And I was like, wow, I love the idea of this. And I can feel it, I could really feel it in my body. I knew the minute that I learned it that I wanted to do it. It was something like, this is something that's just right for me. But the information that I was given came from all over the place, and it was didn't make a lot of sense. So that was a great motivation for actually writing the Reiki Sourcebook, because it motivated me to start researching things, looking into where these different things that I'd been taught, where they came from. And a lot of them were traced back through into the New Age movement, for example, in America. So it was like, okay, well, yeah, but but then there were like aspects of it which were this traditional Japanese Reiki. So it was just sort of finding my way through that. And I enjoyed very much researching it. And I've always loved writing. It was something when I lived in India, I was writing the whole time, and actually wrote a book about my travels there, which wasn't very good. but it was good to always have a go at, like first, the first thing that, first time that you do something like that. And it was great, taught me a lot. So, I with my ex-husband Franz, we started putting material together and trying to work out where it all came from and how it all linked together, and who might have introduced this aspect to the system, and that sort of thing. So that's it. It just felt really right when I first learned it, and it was just something I was in a space when I was in India that I could sort of, you can investigate different things. I wasn't working, a lot of free time to, read. And it was a good time to try to find a bit more self-awareness and see what it was that I wanted to do with my life. And I knew when I first did the first class that this was something that was, that I always wanted to do.
Have you studied with a bunch of different people over the years? And you kind of just pick and choose the things that work.
Yeah, I think the idea of studying with different teachers is a great idea. Each teacher is going to take the same information and they're going to teach it in their own way. So even if they were all teaching the same, which they're not all teaching the same, but even if they were, they would still have their own take on it. And there's some lovely teachers out there, but the thing was that the Reiki that was available to learn in Japan at the time was very New Agey as well, because the Japanese are very interested in the rest of the world, and they will take things and adjust them and have them for themselves. And I think, I don't want to generalize too much, but there can be, and I think we all do this, not as much interest in your own cultural things that evolve and more interest in perhaps something that might seem a bit more exotic. I mean, here am I, an Australian, talking to you in America about a Japanese practice. So, it is that there is, we do go for something that's a little more exotic. I think we like that, don't we? I think everyone does. I think the Japanese like that too. So in Japan at the time, there was a lot of things like dolphin Reiki and, stuff that I have no idea what that is, but it did exist. And, so it was a New Agey style Reiki. But saying that, there were traditional teachers, but they didn't actually advertise or promote what they were doing. And it was more just a small, from World War II, the system of Reiki really did sort of almost die out in Japan. It continued. There's a thread of it that existed through. And now, because of the interest from the West, interestingly, it has actually blossomed a lot more in Japan. And there is more of an interest in the historical aspects of it. So that is really pretty fantastic. But, I met like a little old lady when I was in Japan Chiyoko Yamaguchi, who was lovely. And she had studied with a student of the founder of the system. She's now passed on. But a student of hers and her son, they both teach different aspects of what she taught. There's other teachers who are members of these associations in Japan. The associations themselves don't teach, you learn, I guess, as you go along, but it's not like taking a course, I guess. But they, outside of that association, they will teach foreigners. So, there is more and more happening.
When I think about samurai, let's just go back to the beginning of this thing. I think of, most people think of, a guy with a sword cutting people's heads off in a battle. That's what I think about. But I also think of there's some sort of a discipline that they're not talking about with the rest of the world that makes them so good at doing that if needed. But that's got to be a very small part of what that meant. So if Reiki came out of somebody that grew up in that, so there must have been some practices in that samurai culture that had to do with energy and healing and understanding things in a different way in order to be able to, fight that way for one, but also, to kind of hold that thing together in a way that, somebody outside of it wouldn't understand.
Yeah, I see where you're going. I mean, I'm quite fascinated with the idea of samurai. They were the protectors of the royal family, the emperor, but they were also considered the elite. So, they were the ones who, they could write, and they were, I guess, our aristocrats as such. And there were different levels of samurai. Um, and yes, the discipline within their culture is very interesting. Something that we also do have within the system of Reiki that links through all of this is Japanese poetry, which is not something that you would relate to, a guy in armor with a sword doing some sort of discipline. But Japanese poetry, for example, was very much a part and still is in some circles of Japanese culture. The waka, it means Japanese poem or Japanese song, because it's poetry that's often sung, is actually said to be the oldest form of poetry in the world. And it's not influenced by China or India, which there are a lot of things that came across from India through to China or through Korea and across into Japan. So it's none of those things. It was something that existed prior to those influences. And this type of poetry is quite short. And we know that the martial artists, for example, used to, at full moons, they would go out and they would recite poetry to the moon together. So Japanese culture is very different, and it's got this, it's almost romantic, isn't it? And it's definitely always been energetic and spiritual. So we can see that through this connecting energetically into something like poetry and feeling the poetry and being open to the shifts that poetry can bring to us. I always say poetry is like if you take a book and you cut the essence of that book out, you get a poem. It's magical. It's like these few words, and it can mean and hold so much inside of it. So there is poetry within the system of Reiki. There were at least 125 poems written by the Meiji emperor of the time and his wife, the empress. And these poems, for a long time, were in the West not practiced at all. But, I've been a big proponent of bringing that back in because of the meaning that we can find in it. And the whole reason why anyone is going to practice the system of Reiki is to gain greater awareness and consciousness of themselves in this world. And I think poetry can be a really special tool for that.
I had no idea that was part of it. I love it. That's really cool. How much time did you spend in Japan on the research for this?
I haven't spent a lot of time in Japan. I've researched it sort of from my office a lot.
Sure.
But, I have collected, with my ex-husband, manuals from all over the world, from different teachers, different teachings. So, I've brought a Japanese teacher to Australia to teach. So just really, I guess, being involved in that aspect of it. The Reiki Sourcebook was the first book to be written. And the second book that I also wrote with Franz is called The Japanese Art of Reiki. And that is a book that looks specifically only at the Japanese art of Reiki. So it doesn't include all the things that the 20th anniversary book for the Reiki Sourcebook does. So that's sort of a different, a different book. Yeah.
Are there associations of Reiki associations? Like if somebody went on, I've never looked it up, but if you went online and you were living in the United States like I am, and you wanted to find a way to either study it or find somebody practicing, is there something like that?
There are. I think that if you're wanting to practice, there's a lot of information on the internet, and that can be really confusing, obviously,
Yeah, well,
because, you know,
it's the problem with the internet.
too
It's
much stuff.
great. And
That's why you need to buy. That's yeah. But that's
buy
why
the
you need to
source
buy
book.
the Reiki Sourcebook,
Yeah.
because it will clarify all of that. But what I would say is, if you're looking for a teacher, I think the best thing to do is word of mouth, because
Yeah.
someone, you will know someone who has practiced Reiki or learned Reiki at some point, or someone who, go for a treatment first with someone, see if you like it. Yeah. See if it does something for you, you know, if it's the sort of thing. Because like I said, when I first learned it, I knew that it was for me. But of course, that's not everybody, is it? You know, everyone's going to do something different in their life, which they're really connected to and attracted to. I do think that it's really a wonderful thing for us if we can find something that does help us learn more about ourselves and give us a practice that we can practice on for ourselves. But it doesn't have to be this practice. It could be a lot of other things. And yes, there are associations. They're going to be aligned with different types of Reiki. So you may not get the broader picture. That's all I'm thinking, right? You might not get the broader picture of what is out there. So it's probably, what I would do is probably first just ask around and have a treatment with someone, see if you like it. If you don't, go to someone else. It's lovely to have a Reiki treatment. Have you ever had a Reiki treatment, Bob?
No, I haven't.
No, you haven't, have you?
As far as I know, I haven't. I had a girlfriend way back in the day that said she did Reiki and she was going to do something, but I don't remember any of it. I don't know what she did. I thought she just gave me a massage.
That
or
wasn't
something.
Reiki.
Well, it didn't stay Reiki, whatever it was.
Right. Yeah. No, if you have a proper professional treatment, it is actually really, really beautiful. And it's such a simple thing because we don't manipulate, we don't massage. It's totally energetic. And you can lie down, for example, on a massage table, or yeah, that's normally what happens. But you know, you could actually have it anywhere. If you're in hospital and you had all things all over you and tubes, you could still have a Reiki treatment. But because it is non-intrusive, and you lie down and the practitioner puts their hands on the body or just off the body. They don't touch any private parts. You don't need to take your clothes off. So it's got this really lovely, safe feeling about it. It's like, you know, I mean, I love massages, but yeah, for people who feel intimidated about maybe taking their clothes off or something like that, you know, then or they're scared that someone's going to hurt them if they've got physical pain because of manipulating, then, you know, something like a Reiki treatment is actually really excellent. And the lovely thing about it is that it takes quite a long time for the treatment to, it sort of starts moving and shifting things inside your body. You allow that to happen, right? So if you don't want that to happen, it's not going to happen anyway. If you go into a treatment and go, I don't want to do this, and you know, my wife's making me do this, then you're probably not going to feel a lot anyway, because it's about you. It's not about someone doing something to you. It's about you and just giving over and allowing yourself to actually try to find your way back into balance. So that is a really beautiful thing. And it can, as I said, sort of take its time to happen. So even after you come out of a treatment, you can still sort of feel shifts and you feel a bit different, maybe a bit more open to the world, a little less judgmental, a little bit more aware. And, you know, that shift can take on, you know, it could be days of you enjoying that sort of afterglow of having the treatment.
I'm going to guess that women are better at it than men for the most part.
Reiki practitioners, it's at least 80% are women. And so I don't believe that women are better at it than men. I think that women are more open to it than men. Men are just as good as women.
Okay. Well, I guess that's what I meant. The sort of natural intuition of women is going to, you know, to me, I think women are just a little more sensitive and intuitive.
I am a part of a podcast, and it's called Reiki Women Podcast. And it's 3 Reiki women, myself and 2 other women, and we talk about everything Reiki. It's not specifically about women. It's more about that we are women. So it's women's voices talking. And so it's you know, very much about men and women and the system of Reiki and We've been doing that for about 2 years now, and that's been a great joy. And it is lovely to see women's voices out there talking about something, because what tends to happen is that even though we're more than 80% women in the system of Reiki, a lot of the more well-known teachers, or the people who sort of rise up through the ranks and become, uh, anyway, teachers that people might want to learn with, will often be men. And it's because it's a reflection of our society and how we see our roles and status. And I'm very much about trying to support women to speak up, speak out, and be in those roles. So I think the system of Reiki really is just a reflection of society in that sense.
It's interesting because it's a practice that you wouldn't think that would be the case, but it's such an ingrained thing to have men be the celebrities. I don't know why that is. I was thinking about chefs. Like when you think about chefs, you think about men, but I think more women cook, especially if they got, kids and stuff, and the husband's working out of the house. They're the ones doing all the cooking. So, but the celebrities are chefs are mostly men.
Yeah. We take them more seriously, you see, because if they tell us something, then we believe it. Right.
Yeah. The authority. Well, it's, I don't know why that is. It's just, it's a human habit of some kind. And maybe there's some biological, maybe there's something biological about it in our species. I don't know. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that is something I've noticed.
I think it's evolved into that, and we've evolved into those positions and places, and for sure. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be that way. And I think, especially with our society today, I mean, you would maybe remember, but, when my mum, she did work at times, but it was very common for mums to be stay-at-home mums.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And now, and the men earned enough to be able to support a family. Well, now it's rare for a man to be able to earn enough to support the family. We all need to work, and it's just, we are equal in that sense that we need to both work to exist these days. However, on the other hand, it depends what those roles are, and women still aren't given those roles of authority, as you said, that men so naturally move into. So we're sort of on the back foot, even though we're meant to be doing the same thing. It's sort of a weird position for us to be in, I think, for society in general. But one thing that I was going to say just about Reiki people, like there's a lot of infighting in the system of Reiki, and there's been people suing each other and, all sorts of things in its history, right? Because the people who practice Reiki, I always say the most messed up people end up doing Reiki, because that's why they end up there, right? If you're feeling messed up, right, life is crazy and you've got no control and you don't know what you're doing, then you will be looking for something to support you. And so you will find things like this do actually attract a lot of people who have a lot of problems, which is a great thing, because they're trying to sort themselves out. And we are all just human, and we're all going to be there, Well,
there is that great saying, how the wounded become the healers. It's out of necessity to heal themselves, but it doesn't mean the wounds aren't still there. So, so that you get some pretty amazing people that have pretty amazing problems too. It's kind of an interesting thing. You see it in a lot of fields, actually. It's just, you wonder when you meet somebody what they do is what was the motive for them to do what they do. Why are they doing that? What is the thing that they're trying to complete that's incomplete? What is the impetus for that direction? I always wonder about that when I meet certain, and there are, when you hear what somebody does like for a living, they're generally a certain personality type. Like an insurance salesman and a rock musician are not the same. They're just not the same people.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. They're very different for the most part. Now, could that be? Could somebody do both? Probably, yeah. But I don't. I think one area would not be, firing on all cylinders, to do a car metaphor. So, it's there are a lot of in the sort of wellness and spiritual world, you do meet a lot of pretty fantastic and lost people combined, and I think we all have aspects of that in ourselves anyway.
So true.
So it's
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you have to have a good, healthy eye for who's this person, and what are they doing and why. I'm not saying you got to be suspicious, just be aware.
Oh, so true. Absolutely. I think with anything that you do, but especially something where, I was saying the idea is that you make yourself open for something like this, right? You can't do that if you're not comfortable.
Yes.
So, yeah. So you even though the system of Reiki is incredibly safe, it's one of those things, a lot of people say it can do no harm. What can do harm is the actual person themselves, because of course, with anything, someone could say something to someone which could be quite hurtful or harmful. And the system of Reiki is not a talking modality, where it's not counseling. So there are no skills really of talking to clients in that sense. Although I always recommend that people do a basic counseling course, for example, so that they have some idea of how to be with people who are coming to them if they've got problems. Yeah.
I don't know how much we can change. We can change a lot, but there's certain things that, you come in with biologically, genetically, energetically, historically. There's a lot of pieces to being a human being, and you can change quite a bit, but that thing that you're born, whatever that sort of energy is really, it's limited to how much you can change. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but there's certain predispositions based on all those sort of areas I talked about that you can only go so far, and beyond that, I'm not going to get taller. It's just not going to happen. Maybe I could do an inch or quarter an inch if I did some sort of thing, but I come from
high heels, Bob. High heels.
High heels, yeah, maybe lifts.
Look, I totally agree with you. It's really interesting because it links in a lot to a really fundamental part of our practice within the system of Reiki. And that is, we work with this area, and in Japan, it's called the hara. In China, I think it's called the tanden. Yeah. Anyway, it's this area below the belly button, and it's sort of like the lower abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
And the hara is this thing that it says that you're born with. And in Japanese culture, they have hundreds of sayings about the hara. And it's this strength that you're born with, and it comes from your parents and from their parents and from their parents and from their parents. And so you are this blending of all of that. But the lovely thing about it is as well that, of course, that's going to have good and bad aspects to it, as you're sort of just saying, right? So the good thing about it is that within the system of Reiki, we do practices that work with developing that part of the body, so the lower abdomen, so strengthening it. And it's like the core. And the more practices that we do with it, so our major meditation practices work with that part of the body, then the more that we work with it, it's almost like, I'm going to use the word clearing, but, sort of like clearing that aspect of ourselves. And we can think of it like a bit of a bonfire. When you're breathing down into the lower abdomen, you're firing that up, and you're burning away the stuff that you don't need. So we're actually shifting ourselves from that core that we received from our families, and we can actually change. I think this is the thing. We're not necessarily yes, there are certain aspects of us that can't change, as you said, but there are things about us that we can change, and that's sort of what we work with that. And then the beautiful thing is, if you have children, you can pass that on to your children. But even just being together, like us being together, being in a room with people, you're always affecting everyone around you with how you are and how you say things and how you do things. So shifting yourself to be a better person, I guess, is ultimately what we are working at, and hopefully that then starts to change the world.
Well, I have my own opinions about that.
What? Oh, what are you? Tell me.
I am not one that I don't have a lot of hope for the world to change. I think individuals can
Oh,
change,
right. Yeah.
but I have
Yeah.
not seen evidence that humanity has gotten any wiser, any kinder. We've learned a few things, but I don't think those things that we've accomplished have helped the main thing. That's the issue,
Yeah.
which is these primal instincts gone amok, and the fear that's underneath a lot of this stuff that doesn't seem to have gone away.
Yeah.
And there's still an enormous amount of disturbance and, at worst, cruelty that a certain number of people do and justify. And I haven't seen an improvement overall in the world of that. But I think there's the seekers that want something better. I think they can change some of that, but ultimately I think it is built in, it's baked into what humanity is. I just and it's not a negative thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
So am I hopeful of certain things? Yeah, sometimes, but overall, no. And it doesn't even
I think,
depress me
yeah.
anymore. It doesn't make me
No,
sad.
no.
It doesn't even make me angry, except when I see the manifestation of it. It's very disheartening. But overall, I think you have to come to some level of acceptance of that is always going to be a part of what we were born into. And how do we as individuals navigate that so it doesn't overwhelm us or make us less than we can be as individuals.
Yeah. Did you feel that when you were 20?
I was more hopeless. It
Right.
started, yeah, that sort of dissatisfaction
You're on
with
an up trajectory, are
yeah,
you?
absolutely, yes. No, my dissatisfaction with the human race started very young. And not from any specific trauma or anything like that, just sort of looking around and seeing how behaviors
Yeah.
and what went on. It was really, I think a lot of teenagers go through that. They call it teenage angst or whatever you call it.
Oh, sure.
And then
Yeah.
and then I sort of ran with that, as a worldview way too long. And I tried to medicate myself out of it, with alcohol and all kinds of experiences to not sort of to just sort of bypass it as much as I could with some kind of fun, mistaking pleasure seeking for happiness. That was a big mistake. Big mistake, and it went on a little too long. But the idea that any of that was about me really wasn't about me. It just was the way the world is in a certain aspect of the world. I don't even see myself as a negative person. I just kind of look around and see certain things, and I'm not going to deny that they exist. I won't, I'm not going to embrace it and swim in it. I don't want to do that either. So maybe after this, I'll, take a hot bath. I don't know. I didn't think I was going to go down this road, but this is what I
That's
think
cool.
it's sort of worth talking about because,
Yeah.
a lot of people that do sort of gravitate toward, sort of this more negative side of things and embrace that too much, embrace it too much to their own detriment. And I don't want to do that either, but it's there.
I understand what you're saying. And I think that if you look, I mean, there's a couple of things. One thing is that, you know, you said that at the beginning of that, you know, if we change things for ourselves, then we're going to experience things differently. And that there are some people who do that. And I agree, not everybody does. And I mean, if you think about, if we're passing down stuff generation by generation, and a lot of that stuff is, you know, war and horror, and, you know, there's a lot of trauma that is embedded inside of all of us, and whether we see it or not. In fact, I was talking to this woman the other day who works with recovery, and she was saying the way she described recovery was just how I would describe working with the system of Reiki. She was saying that we all have something to recover from, and that everybody has something that they're recovering from. And it doesn't have to be necessarily about drugs or alcohol, but we're all in recovery. So we're all trying to find our way back into that balance. You know how I was describing, like, that's what we're doing. We're always trying to find our way back into some sort of balance to deal with what's going on in our world. And I thought that was really interesting. And I do think that it is a natural state for us to find. I think it's very natural for the human to try to find its way back into balance. I do believe that's happening all the time. So we are, if that's true, then we are trying to work with all of these things that we see, and, you know, the cruelty and the ways of the world that can be very depressing. And we're always trying to shift and work our way with that. But it always comes back to us, I think. So if I see myself, I think you at this moment are a part of my world, my universe, my existence, and how I see things and how I'm experiencing things. But I feel like we all have our own different universes that we live in. Everyone's got their own world. And I can't make your world anything. That's why with something like Reiki, we don't actually try to make or manipulate a person. It's really just about supporting them in trying to find their own balance. So your world is your world, your view is your view, and it's not mine, and that's fine. And I can only live my own life and see it from my own perspective and do with it what I want to do with it. And I think that's for everybody the same thing. And we are all the center of our own universes. We're not like, you know, this is my world. I am nothing else but this. And everything that I can see and feel and hear and experience, that's all I know. I can't know your world or your experience or your feelings. So in my world, I'm working on being a better person.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's a decision, and that comes with a certain amount of responsibility that you have to take for yourself. You know, it's. I was thinking about the word trying. I'm trying. Well, it's like, well, what does that mean? You know, to hold a pencil up and try to drop it. That's an impossible thing. You either drop it or you don't drop it. There's no trying. So perhaps what someone's saying is when they're trying, they're inconsistent with their effort. That's really what. So the problem is not trying; the problem is inconsistency. That's just a thought I had this morning.
Well, it's you know, we have these precepts in the system of Reiki, and they're just little guidelines, but they are so good. They're really incredibly simple, but they're so hard to do. And they start off with for today only. So it's always just whatever is happening right now. And whatever is happening right now is never actually trying, because it's actually happening right now, right? So, you know, we aren't really ever trying to do anything. All we are doing is just existing, I think.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I like that. So say the name of the book again and where people can get it, because it's a source book for all things Reiki.
The Reiki Sourcebook, yeah. And it is the 20th anniversary, which is absolutely amazing. You don't see many Reiki books out last very long. And this is just, it's like a little, what were they called? The Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica for Reiki.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, right. And everyone should have one. Anyone who's interested in Reiki should definitely have one of these in their cupboard so they can use it to look stuff up and find out about things. So, yep, I'm Bronwen Logan, and my website is Reiki with Bronwen, so that's easy to remember. If you can get my name spelt right, of course, but
Well, we'll
Bob will
spell it
write
right
up
now.
there, so.
Bronwen. Reiki with
That's it.
Bronwen.
That's
See how
me.
clearly I said that? Now, people, write it down, folks.
Beautiful.
Go get your pen and write it down. I'll have it in the show notes also if you're interested, listeners. Thanks so much for talking to me. What time is it there in Australia?
It's a lovely 11:10 a.m.
Oh, so nice. My day is winding down. It's, well, not winding down. It's 4 p.m. But wow, what a pleasure to talk to you. And good luck on the book. Is it out already?
Okay.
This reissue of this new thing?
I just got a message today saying it was in the warehouse. I think it's going to be out on the 1st of December officially.
Okay, so if you're listening to this and it's after the 1st of December, which it could be, that's when you can get it. And if it's not, just wait till the 1st of December. It's a lovely stocking stuffer if you have a giant stocking, because it's big. It's a big, thick book. Yeah. Well, you have a. Do you say lovely there, or is that just British? You say lovely in Australia.
No, we say
it?
lovely.
Yeah. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely. I always like when the Australians and the British say lovely, because they say it lovely. So they say lovely. Let's have a lovely.
Well, we don't in Australia. That's it. British.
That's British. That's the British way.
How say lovely.
Say lovely.
Lovely.
And brilliant. That's another one of my faves.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And the New Zealanders say awesome. Yes. So
awesome.
We all have our
awesome. It sounds so dumb, doesn't it? American. It's awesome, man. It's really awesome. So your book is awesome, brilliant, and lovely. All those things. Have a great evening, day and evening.
Fantastic, Bob. It was beautiful talking to you. Thanks so much.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There's a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. If you'd like to get a hold of Bronwen, it is www.reikiwithbronwen.com. And have a fantastic day. Thank you.